Hi, in this video I want to stress the possible bias that may come when using data, because it's important to understand that algorithms are everywhere, that using data, a lot of decisions will impact us in our everyday life. And so as future manager, a future leader of a department or maybe companies, I think it's important that you understand how those data can help you, but how there are problems that you should consider and mm, try to minimize as possible. So one of the main problems that we know of as a normal citizens is that algorithm may help to spread fake news, because the algorithm embedded in YouTube or Facebook always pushed you information that belong to the same cluster. So once you're in a rabbit hole, you will continue in that way. So most of the algorithm embedded in those social medias only propose contents that will confirm your beliefs. So this is important to know, because as a citizen, you may want to do further search in order to be sure that what you are being fed by those social media is right, or at least confirmed by other sources. So this is for your day-to-day life. But more important for your role as an engineer, algorithm can be a way of spreading inequality and making efficient decision. For instance, one of the assumption of database and prediction is that the future can be forecast or predict using past and present data. It also means that when you have a behavior or a phenomenon that is not good or not equal, if you use data from the past, you will copy-paste this behavior to the future. So you will increase inequality. For instance, Amazon tried to build an artificial intelligence to sort through CV for their human resource department. So how did they do that? They input all CV they received for the last 10 years with a label of was this person recruited or not. So as a result, the artificial intelligence reproduce the same behavior as was the norm 10 years ago. That means that women and people with unusual education profile were discarded because they were discarded in the past. So Amazon discovered this bias and shut down the artificial intelligence, but other companies may still use this information, these systems to decide. So there are bias that come from space, from history, so past data, but there are also bias that will come from today's data. One of the examples that I like to talk about is this artificial intelligence built by an advertisement company which wanted to maximize the spread of an ad, which was a job ad, for a given budget. And they wanted to target people using Facebook. And when they use this algorithm on Facebook, they observed a very strange result, which was that only men were targeted. So there was no use of past data, only today's data were used, but still, only men were targeted by this job offer. So they dig into the data, try to understand why. And so one of the reasons, the main reason actually, that explain this phenomenon is that on Facebook, so you may input your gender or not, but when you input your gender, you are identified as what you input, for sure. So if you said you were a woman, then you are represented and considered as a woman. And for Facebook, their business model is based on the collection of free data that you freely give to them. And then from this free data, they make money by selling those profiles. And in order to sell them in a best economical way, they've done some research. And one of the research, which is fact, is that usually in modern country, in modern markets, the women are responsible for the majority of the household spending. So when you are willing to address people who are doing the decision of buying or not a product, you should target women, because those are the people who will make those decisions once in the shop. So for sure, once you know that, what you want to do if you are selling those info, those data, is to say, okay, I can assure you that this profile corresponds to a woman, and so there is more chance that if you target this profile, they will buy the product you advertise for. So in Facebook, profiles for women are more expensive than profiles for men. And since the objective of the the algorithm of spreading the job ad was to maximize the spread for a given budget, then you will have to target the least expensive profile, which are men. So the bias was not done based on past bias that women were not adapted to some kind of job. It was only meant to rely on economical aspects. So this is interesting to understand. So even if you don't use data from the past, you may create bias. A lot of bias come from economical aspects, even in healthcare. So for instance, pharmaceutical studies to study the benefit of a given drug, for instance, they are done mostly on men because it's less expensive. It's less expensive if you're using humans, because when you are participating to a health study and you are a woman, you have to certify that you will not get pregnant during the time of the study, so you will get more money than men. So pharmaceutical firms tend to choose men. It's easier because you don't have to give them as many money as for women subjects. But this phenomenon also applies to rats. So when you are buying rats to test drugs in the early phases of the development, it's cheaper to buy male rats. So that means that even when the studies are done on rats, they are tested only or mostly on male rats. So those is very interesting because the results might be very different if you choose a more representative group, but because of economical aspect, there will be bias in your study. So this is interesting to understand and to try to correct. So what can you do as an engineer? So first of all, you have to know that there will be bias in algorithm. There will be bias because of the data you use or because of the objective you try to use. So you have to choose carefully your data, trying to avoid bias by selecting data. You can maybe only try to remove the gender data, the descriptor, and then use the same sample. That may remove the problem. But you have to test. So most of the time, you have to know that bias may occur and test. When you create an algorithm, test the result. Of course, test to see if the results are the right ones. Did your algorithm learn well? Did it produce the kind of result you were expecting? And then test for bias. Check for gender bias, check for geographical bias, check for any kind of bias you can think of. And then, by doing it systematically, maybe you can avoid to make decisions that will create more inequality in our world.